He's had apple bananas, which I had when I was there. They're very good. They're like this little tangy version
We
of
got
it.
sound issues.
Wait,
Hang on,
yeah,
Steve.
sorry, we must have had a sound issue.
There's no
we're good
sound.
now. Yeah, just started again. Pretend like that never happened.
Okay. Can everybody hear us now?
They can hear you now. Here, I'll do
All right. So we're gonna
Okay.
start. We're gonna start over fresh.
All right,
do a
let me get back to my
quick intro. Here, one second.
Okay.
Blast off.
All right. Hey everyone, welcome to the Friday
hey,
live
it's
stream
you.
again.
What's up?
How are you? How's
right.
everyone
How are
doing?
you?
Yeah, great.
So as you were saying, which you couldn't hear, Jay's in Hawaii. He's actually not on the live stream. And I was talking to him the other day. So Jay's obsessed with trying every local banana that he can get his hands on.
Yeah.
So he's tried the apple bananas, which I've had when I was there. They're pretty cool. They're like smaller. They're like about half the size of a Cavendish.
Why is it called an apple banana?
I guess they're supposed to have like an apple taste to them. They
Do they?
there's a little tang to them. They're good. I like them. And he said he got a faked out Gros Michel. Like somebody sold him a banana and told him it was a Gros Michel, but it wasn't.
That is cruel, especially
I'm
for
sorry.
Jay.
I don't
or
mean
any
to
of
laugh.
us. That would be cruel.
And he said he had an ice cream banana, which was disappointing.
Oh.
But
His
he said
expectations are probably through the roof.
he said far and away the best local fruit he
the
had
Thai one,
wasn't a banana. Well, the Thai apple banana is basically an apple banana, but it was not a banana. It was like a white pineapple, which he said was just
albino
incredible,
pineapple.
just off the hook.
So
Just incredible.
Some kind of hybrid fruit?
It's just a different cultivar of pineapple.
Wow. I've only known pineapple to taste one way.
Yeah, he says basically you take all the acid out of the pineapple, and that's what it is.
Oh, I do like the acid in the pineapple. It's so good. Oh, by the way, pineapple on pizza, yes. I'm a hard yes vote on that.
Nah, I like pineapple on stuff, but not pizza.
The pineapple and ham pizza, yes, absolutely.
Pineapple's okay with ham. Pineapple with chicken is good. We have this.
Yes. I'll have that.
Yeah, this. What do we call that? There's some kind of chicken dish that has pineapple.
Chicken Polynesian?
Chicken Polynesian, yeah. It's chicken, pineapple, green peppers, and the sauce is made from like
Russian dressing.
creamy Russian dressing.
It sounds
and
great.
It's really
something else.
super
It sounds
delicious.
a lot better than it is. A lot better than it sounds.
It's super delicious, and I tell you, the pineapple is what makes that dish.
Yeah, totally.
That's a
You gotta
critical component.
You
Little
eat it
hot
over
chunks of
amount of
pineapple.
rice.
It's epic. But man,
Yeah.
Russian dressing, just pour oil over everything. Basically.
But it's good. So there's some news that we didn't talk about this week on the show. I saw this on Wednesday when we were recording, but everyone had already picked their news items. So we might save it for next week, but we can give you, I don't know, it'd be a little crusty by then. This is some follow-up analysis of Cassini data from Enceladus. If you recall, Enceladus is one of the icy moons of Saturn, and it definitely has liquid water underneath the crust. It's one of the better candidates for oceanic, microbes or life. And it also ejects plumes, through like geysers through the surface ice. And so Cassini passed through the plumes at one point and was able to do some analysis.
Great.
So we already knew that there was some methane in the plumes of Cassini, of Enceladus rather. But the new analysis was doing some modeling to say, well, how much methane is there? What else is there? And what could be the possible cause of methane? Now, methane is one of those potential signatures for life because living organisms can produce methane as a byproduct, but methane can also be created geologically. But methane is very reactive and therefore it's not stable. So you're not going to just have methane hanging around.
Yeah, it doesn't last.
Yeah,
If it's
for a
there,
long
it
time.
was created relatively recently.
Yeah, so it's
okay.
it's
Yeah,
being
great.
actively created. That's the idea. It's got to be actively created. So either it's actively
Yeah.
being created by geological processes or by life. So biotic or abiotic. Remember, they've also found methane on Mars, and it was the same. Although the consensus there is it's probably geologically created methane, but it's always tantalizing. But here's the thing: the new analysis concludes that the amount of methane is greater than even the highest estimate for known geological causes of methane that could be going on Enceladus. So it seems like there's more methane there than can be accounted for by abiotic processes. So that means, one of a few things. One is the measurement's wrong. That might be correct. Or it's there's geological processes that we're not aware of that are causing that methane, or there's a biotic process on Enceladus creating that methane. So of course that's the one that gets everybody excited. So, it's just one more tantalizing little thing that someplace in the solar system that could be a signature for life, but it's indirect evidence, and clearly we've got to get probes to Enceladus.
Yeah, it's just reason number 300 to go to
Yeah.
Enceladus.
Yeah, this is if this is true, this is one of the best pieces of evidence that I've heard. In terms of some sort of biology happening in our solar system, and I think we should be canceling other programs and focusing on getting some sort of probe to Enceladus ASAP.
Well, the ASAP, unfortunately, is going to mean decades at the earliest, unless somebody pours ridiculous amounts of money into it. But the thing is, if what we really want to do is drill down and get some of the water to analyze, right? So
yeah,
we would have to develop
a new
we'd
technology.
have to develop the technology, the hardware to do
boy.
that. That could take a long time, and then of course we'd have to build it, test it, send it to Enceladus, which would take years. So it's
but who knows? Yeah, you're right. That level of investigation is forget it. We're all gonna be dead.
Yeah.
But I think they should create something that can capture some of that material that's ejected to analyze it or potentially even bring it back or whatever. I think that's definitely the next step here. The first step though, I think, is confirm this in the data from Cassini, and then if it's absolutely confirmed and we really just can't think of anything other than biology that created that methane, then let's get a sample kit. Let's get a sample of it to examine. And I would put, I don't know how long it would take if this was put on a fast track, a really fast track, which I think it would deserve. Almost more than anything else we're doing in astronomy right now.
Well,
in space exploration, I
It'll still
would
be
get
20
something
years.
over there.
For comparison, the Cassini project was conceived in 1982 and it was launched in 1997. 15 years from conception to launch. That was just the launch, and then all the years it takes to actually get there. And hope everything
if
goes
you go
right.
at the speed of light, you can get to Saturn in 81 minutes.
Oh yeah, so no problem.
So that's a best case scenario.
that would be best. Can't get better than that.
Yeah, that's the best case scenario.
Wow.
That's not going to happen.
By far.
Right.
But despite, I think we have to go. We should go. All efforts should go into going, and it should be, I think, again, a public and private joint operation. I think I think there would be enough. It would help with the resources. It would help spread things out a bit. And if these billionaires are serious about further space exploration and things, I would think that this would be high on their list of places.
I don't know. That's not the way it's shaking out, though. So
I know.
The deep space is still the province of nations, not private industry.
Yeah, but this is looking for potential life. So this is kind of a
Even more. It would be a purely scientific mission. I think rather than a public-private partnership. I think it should be an international partnership, like have NASA, partner with the ESA and
For what specifically?
whoever else
Well-
to send a probe to Cassini, have it be an international project, funded and developed.
If we're going to take Bob's point, though, and we do want to fast track it, wouldn't private help make that a faster
But
process
where's the profit in it for them? This is just scientific deep space, scientific exploration.
profit
I just don't
is-
think it's appropriate for that.
It's the discovery of the century, or bigger than that.
Yeah.
That's gargantuan. No matter assuming they find life, whether it's obviously seeded from Earth, or they seeded us, or if it's different. Either way,
What
the two outcomes, possible
Yeah.
outcome is as epic is the discovery of that's it. I mean, what else? That's number one on everyone's list for science news of the year, the decade, and the century. Right? Life other than Earth on another planet. To me, that warrants so much money and effort and speed. That but only when you cross the Rubicon, right? When you cross the point where like this really looks like biology, and we can think of nothing else that could possibly do it. Come on.
So I wonder how much
get
more
it done.
how much more analysis or retesting or confirmation of the Cassini data would we need to suggest that it's not a instrument failure or a misreading, and it's not simply geological functions.
So the only thing that we could do by like reanalyzing the data is to make sure that the signal is correct. But let's assume that it is. There's no analysis they could do to tell us if it's biotic or abiotic. We just don't have that information.
Still have a
They're just
data set
running.
one.
They're just running models. They're just running. Is it any potential way theoretically that it could be geologic in origin? So that's I don't think there's any further analysis going to help them. We need to get more data. We need to get new data.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool stuff.
Yep. And Europa is still hanging out there. I mean, Europa might be even a better candidate. It's just that it's not sending plumes, into
It's not,
Right.
It's not puking up the stuff we want to investigate.
and the crust is probably thicker, so it'd be even harder to drill down.
Yeah, and that's a nasty area around Jupiter. The radiation's pretty intense. I'm not sure what it would be around Enceladus, but I know around Jupiter it's pretty intense.
Right.
Yes.
So how was your guys' fourth?
Good, man.
It was
Very good.
fine. Just fine. It was kind of a cool weekend.
Yeah, it was
Weather-wise.
the weather was mellow.
Yeah.
But it held out because we were expecting rain that day on the 4th, and it never really came. So that was good. And
Then we got hit the last couple of days. We got hit with tropical storm. Is it Elsie?
Yes, Elsie or Elise. Yeah.
Yeah, we had a ton of rain the last 2 days, and then the sun just suddenly
Elsie.
came out, and now it's sunny.
yeah.
Oh boy,
back-
we
but
got
back
it
to the
hard this
4th,
morning. That's for sure.
I was very happy with my 12-foot skeleton July 4th decoration.
Oh yes, yeah. Do
that
you
I
have a
wanted-
picture? Where do we have a
I
picture?
wanted to share. Let's see. So this is my 12-foot skeleton.
Make that large.
You
That
can't
I
really see the
decor-
scale though.
Yeah, where's the person
Well-
standing next to it?
Well, let's see. I've got another. I come up to what his mid thigh, but I made the hat. I made the rockets. It was a lot of fun. A lot of fun.
Speaking of large skeletons, I don't know if you guys read anywhere, and I'm sorry I don't have it prepared in front of me, but
Here's me standing next to
oh, there it is. Okay, good. There's your perspective. Yeah,
There we
Mhm.
go. It's big. It's a big boy.
it is. I've been there. I've seen it. In China, the new fossils, or that they've analyzed, or the old fossils discovered that they've taken a second look at in China. Did we talk about that on the show? I can't recall.
No, which ones are you talking about?
Oh gosh,
the human
ones.
ones?
Yeah, the human ones.
Yeah, the Dragon Man, I think they're called.
Right. Did you hear anything about it being
Oh, yeah.
of unusual size, like proportion to Homo sapien?
No.
Because I saw in one place someone was comparing, and I'll see if I can dig it up. They said that effectively the creationist argument they were making is that it was 1.4 times, 1.5 times the size of of Homo sapien. Is that right? That would seem really unusual. And he said there it is. That was said in the Bible. It's all about the giants. There's a whole subcult of people who
Yeah.
interpret the Bible, then which they talk about giants left and right, and giants once roamed the earth, and they said here's your evidence for giants. I just hadn't heard that the Dragon Man remains were anything out of proportion.
No, it's not true.
Yeah, it would have to be made. He made that up, or he just whatever. But I never heard that.
So yeah, the Dragon Man, it had a skull, equivalent size to modern humans.
Yeah,
That
is
was
what I
robust, but not giant, just was, robust
Right.
like Neanderthals were robust.
So as usual, they get that wrong. But
Yeah,
it
I'm just
fits their
looking at
narrative. So
scanning the article here. So yeah, I think these are
let's see.
fossils that they discovered a long time ago.
Yeah, they didn't go analyzed for a while. They got put away
Yeah.
and not taken out for some time. A group that lived in East Asia at least 146,000 years ago. It was
Mhm.
originally found in 1933. The remains.
Yeah, so I guess they're still analyzing its genome.
Okay.
It may be related to the Denisovans. So it's one of the Homo sapiens shoot-offs,
And
offshoots.
I'm looking at a picture. They have the Dragon Man skull on the far right of this one, and
Yeah.
there's Homo sapiens among this. There's no size difference. What the heck are they talking about? They said
Yeah.
1.4 times. I mean, are you crazy? That's not even close. Not even close. Just based on that picture, but
Hmm.
I guess they'll pull anything out of their butts to
Yeah.
try to grab a headline.
No, that happens a lot. If you follow, or if you know somebody who follows it and will bring it to your attention, the evangelical news, they
Yeah.
will misinterpret anything from paleontology or science or whatever, and that they could twist and and turn and make it seem like it supports the Bible in some way, even if even if they have to get the story completely wrong.
It's their job.
Yep. You have to be on the lookout for those kinds of things when news like this hits. You got to figure, okay, when you have to kind of look to the sides to say, all right, where are the creationists, where are the flat earthers, or whomever else is going to come out and have their opinion on the latest science news. So always be on the lookout.
I wrote about the North American heat wave, 122 degrees Fahrenheit. That's around 51 degrees Celsius in Canada.
Madness.
Canada.
Yeah,
That's-
unprecedented.
that's
It's
nuts.
the highest temperature recorded in many, many areas. And this is the first time you hear climate scientists say this is global warming. Not
Yeah.
you can't
Yep.
tie a specific event to, which is, of course, technically true, but they're saying, but you just would never see this if it weren't for, anthropogenic global warming. The
Yep.
probability of this happening is negligible. So it's, it's clearly related. And, of course, 2020 was this technically the second warmest year on record. It was almost, tied with 2016 for the first.
See, it's going in the right direction.
But yeah, I mean, the last decade was
No.
definitely the warmest decade on record. Guys, remember when we were doing this 10 years ago and all the global warming deniers were saying,
Mm-hmm.
oh yeah, the global warming stopped in 1998. It's not happening anymore. Things are going to start cooling back down again now. It's not going to keep warming. And then, of course, the next decade was the warmest decade on record.
Yep.
Obviously, there's
keeps
still
happening.
year-to-year fluctuations. It's not like every year is the warmest year. There's still the El Nino cycle
Right.
and everything. So yeah, the thing about that is that there was a clear prediction made by the two sides. Where the climatologists were
Well,
saying
I like predictions. Like
it's going to continue to get warmer. That's what our models say. The next decade is going to be warmer than the previous one, and the deniers were saying that it wasn't. And one side was objectively, clearly,
Yep.
dramatically correct. And it goes, obviously, again, this heat wave is not the evidence for global warming. It's just a very likely manifestation of it. But it's getting so extreme that they're equivocating a lot less, about
Right.
the relationship between a specific extreme weather event and AGW, anthropogenic global warming.
Back
Not
in
that it changes anything. Not that they just retreat to other points. It's like, well, sure, but it's not man-made, or well, sure, but it's not going to be bad, or what it reduces the number of people who die from cold weather events, which is true. But if you
okay,
do a full analysis,
move that goalpost. Move that goalpost.
yeah, the most recent and most thorough analysis shows that the net weather-related deaths go up. So there's more increased deaths from warming than there are decreased events from extreme cold weather.
and that's just the human toll. We're not even talking about
yeah,
all
yeah.
the other animals.
There's a massive economic toll. There's
Ocean
destroyed
toll.
infrastructure, lost work, healthcare costs, lost agriculture. Absolutely. You know what I'm saying? And the economy. Whenever economists take a look at it, the answer is pretty clear, pretty dramatic. There's a fairly good consensus. Yeah, it's going to cost the U.S. billions and the world trillions.
Easily,
many
trillions,
coming
many
decades.
trillions.
So yeah, so any if we need to spend billions of dollars to deal with it, then
Yeah,
so be it, because you're going to be saving a lot more money. But in terms of the pure heat, though, from what I've read, the way things are going, there are certain countries, say in the Middle East, that have like crazy hot. Like when it gets hot, it gets like 122 Fahrenheit. What was that in Celsius, Steve?
like 50, 51.
50. I mean, it gets in the 120s. Say a few times a year, and that heat is at a level where people die, and it's so bad that you really can't live there if that heat was more common.
Yeah.
So they're saying that
Right.
at some point in the future that those types of places, and there's a few of those countries around the world, I think especially focused in the Middle East, where they're predicting that it's going to be 120 degrees plus, like 30 days a year. Like
Yeah.
it's gonna leap so high that it's gonna turn that place into an area that is essentially not livable anymore.
Right.
And
So
many
it's not. Yeah.
so many people will be dying that it's like, well, we can't live here. We gotta move. And so then you're basically going to have millions of people migrating to other countries that aren't quite as hot as the country that they've been living in for a really
But
long time.
There's a couple other
Caveats,
layers to
what?
that make it even
Sure,
worse.
I'm sure there
so,
are.
Yeah, so the places that do get, we'll say deathly heat, will get it for a longer number of days per year. But right now, about 30 to 40% of the world's population live in a location where at some point in the year, they may get, life-threatening heat. But that number is going to go up to 70% by the end of the century, again, if global warming is not abated.
Right.
Which means there's going to be fewer and fewer places for you to go. Like 70% of the world's population is going to be living in places like Canada, that you can get 120-degree weather. And it's going to disproportionately affect countries that are relatively poor.
Always,
and
always.
The other thing is, like in Canada, the part of the reason why it's so deadly is because a lot of the houses there don't have air conditioning because it's Canada.
Right, they can't.
Yeah, so it's just they're just not used to having to deal with this kind of weather. It's like the cold snap we had in Texas where the houses didn't have heat, because they usually don't get weather that cold.
That's nuts because I live with my mom. I take care of my mom. So and she's I'll just end that sentence right there. She's very sensitive to cold. So to a kind of like an interesting level. Steve, you're aware of this. So she gets very cold, so she'll just turn off the air conditioning. And then I come downstairs and the bottom floor of the house is 82 degrees. 82 degrees because it's 80 to 85 outside, or even upper 70s. When you turn off heat and air conditioning, that the house just kind of like absorbs all that heat, and the house gets to 82, which is nuts.
Yeah.
And now I could imagine. Can you imagine living in a house where it's not 80 outside, but 120 outside, and you don't have air conditioning? I mean, you would not live for long.
Right. Another thing is, not just
done.
like you
Game
have
over.
some air conditioning. You need a lot of air conditioning to handle. So if you have mild air conditioning, it's not going to be able to keep up with it.
Right.
And then what happens when you have, a heat wave like this, and people do have backup air conditioning? What's going to happen to the energy demand? It's going to spike.
Yeah, and you'll have
And it's going to exceed the local grid, right? It's going to exceed not just demand; it's going to exceed capacity. Yeah. Capacity, I believe, is the correct terminology there. So it's going to exceed their maximum capacity because it's the kind of thing that happens once a year, once every few years, or whatever. And so if every region by grid has to keep enough capacity to handle an air conditioner spike during a heat wave, that's a great deal of inefficiency then that has to be added to our energy infrastructure in order to handle that. It stresses the system in so many different ways. You know what I mean? So it's like the more you look at it, the worse it gets. It's not just, there was a heat wave. It's like it touches so many different things. So anyway, it's just it's a taste of what's coming.
Mm-hmm.
Like these events are getting increasingly frequent. These once a century, once a lifetime kind of events are now happening on a regular basis. And we're really just at the beginning. This is this is not even when the bad stuff is supposed to be happening yet. It's supposed to be more the second half of the century.
Yeah, and our mitigation technology is not there. It's like non-existent.
Yeah.
So a lot of pieces to the puzzle to try to help solve this, and a lot of them just haven't been invented yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So let me add a little more detail here. The reason for my frustration for this 82 degrees in the house, I don't think 82 is necessarily ridiculously hot. I think it's uncomfortably hot in a house that you're living in, and the fact that my mom is sitting there with an 82 degree house when all she has to do is switch a dial to get it much more reasonable and comfortable, and she's happy with 82. It's just mind-boggling that she's totally okay with it. I'm sitting there watching TV with her, sweating, and she's totally okay with it. I don't know, Steve, is that an age thing, or is that because she's got no adipose tissue? What's going on? That 82 to her, I said to her, Mom, are you comfortable? She's like, yeah, I'm comfortable. And it's like, how could you be comfortable in a house at 82?
Put on a sweater, Bob.
She makes a good living.
It's just mind-boggling that she's okay with it. And it's worse though when she actually turns on the heat. So when you're specifically heating the house to be 82, and we've gotten electricity bills that says you have the highest electricity bill of your entire street. Well, I'm not surprised because some crazy old lady is making it 82 degrees on purpose.
She should just dress more warmly, not, you know what I mean? It's a lot more efficient to do that.
No, I try that, Steve. Believe me, I try that. Mom, put something on your feet. Put something on. And she's like, Bob, my nose is cold. What am I going to do? I'm like, put on a nose cozy. Do something. But this is nuts.
Right. Evan, why don't you tell us about that puzzle behind you?
Oh, this one here.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay. The other one over there.
Oh, that one over there. This is an outline of a place.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a pretty simple puzzle. Just you got to figure out where is this.
It does look like a coastline.
Yeah, there's coastline there, most definitely.
Mm-hmm.
We had some correct guesses. I think the first person to guess, at least I was checking on the regular chat, Miguel. Sorry if I wrote down your name, Miguel Romero, guessed correctly. And from Discord, we had a correct guess from Sweet Beebles. I like that name. Sweet Beebles. So there were plenty of correct guesses. Here, let me see if I can fix this a bit and see what happens here.
Blam, blam.
Oh, look at
Rotate
that.
it.
Wait, maybe it's a little more familiar now, maybe?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought it looked like India.
Yeah, India. India turned basically just 90 degrees. And we've talked about this before, about perspective and maps on the show, and they always make for good puzzles, especially visual puzzles. And so I thought I'd put together a familiar place to a lot of people to see how many would guess right. And there were plenty, several good guesses, several correct guesses. And a lot of people obviously knew that this was a place and just which country or which continent or whatever it is you thought it was. So for all those who guessed India, you're correct and you win this week. Tell them what they win, Steve.
They win our enduring respect. Enduring meaning until next week.
Wow.
Yes.
That is that
Right,
money
the
cannot
reset
buy
button.
that. Yes.
Yeah.
It's all about context. Just yesterday I was driving, and ever come upon a road that you know inside and out. You've been on this road a billion times, but you're coming to it at a 90-degree angle that you typically don't, and you're looking at the road that you're approaching, and you're like, where the hell's this? And then you remember, and it smacks you in the face, like, dude, you've been down this road a million times, but because you were seeing it from a completely different perspective than typical, it's like you're lost for a second. It's just always
I've totally had that experience. Like there's one time I was driving in New Haven, and I'm coming down a street just north to south instead of south to north, and I was trying to find something, so I wasn't exactly sure where I was. Like I was kind of lost, and then you have that eureka moment where you suddenly realize where you are. You know what I mean? But I didn't recognize it because I never entered that street from that direction. I'm usually coming the other way. But the neurologically, do you know why that happens? So
map of the
Eureka
mind. Moment.
Yeah, because you have place cells, in your brain that remember locations. So it's as if when your mental map of your three-dimensional space is you have place cells, which is a certain location, and then your brain sort of keeps track of where you are within that location. But then when you go to a new location, it switches over to a new place cell, which is attached to that new location. Right? So it's kind of like a patchwork of different place cells. So
we've moved. Yeah, so fold up that map, now open up this map, and now you're on this
map. It's like you go to a new map. Exactly. I remember I had that experience when we were at DragonCon one year, because you get a little familiar with your route and because I guess the place cells align to certain landmarks, right? You have certain landmarks that have a certain relationship to other landmarks, and that creates sort of a sense of where you are, and then you can keep track of how you're maneuvering around that space. But again, we were walking from somewhere to somewhere else, whatever. We didn't know where we were, and we were, again, we were in some part of the city, and at first I had no idea where we were, and then it's like you see a landmark, and then suddenly you know exactly where you are, right? Because it just clicks into place. It's like, oh, I'm in this place cell. Then it shifts it. Your brain sort of clicks it in, activates that.
Yeah, your
place
GPS
cell.
locks in.
Your GPS locks in. Now you know where you are, and then you can sort of reorient yourself. Oh, I'm looking at it from this other direction, and that's over there. Then so totally.
And
so our experiences match the underlying neuroanatomical correlates.
Is that way back from our hunter-gatherer days when you were out hunting for many days? You had to find your way back.
I guess so. Yeah, and there are differences though. I know this is not something I've looked at recently, so I'm going on my memory. But people who learn to drive in the city and the country develop different mental strategies for navigation. So if you learned how to drive in a city, you rely more upon a grid pattern, right? So like if you give somebody else directions, you go down 3 streets, take a left, go 2 streets, and take a right. Whereas in a more of a rural setting, you'll be take a left at the big rock, and then
right.
Yeah.
and then go until you see the church. So you use landmarks, not a more of a digital. It's like digital versus analog almost. Like you're not counting streets. You're going by major landmarks. Of course, I think most people use both, like depending on the context, and they use a meshwork of both. But there is this difference of like to what extent you rely on one pattern versus the other, depending on where you usually drive or where you learned how to drive, which is interesting.
Yeah, it reminds me of that scene from the Shawshank Redemption in which he's describing to Red where to go to find the thing he leaves for him, and it's out in the wilderness of Maine, or the fields of Maine. He said you'll see the tree, it's at the end of the long fence, but those were the markers, and those are the markers of places like that. It's the big tree at the end of the stone fence, and you're driving around, you see nothing until you come across a tree with a stone fence.
So, where we are in Connecticut, it's technically suburban, I guess, but it's like
We're a hybrid.
Pretty rural. It's kind of somewhere between suburban and rural, and some of it gets downright rural, in places in Connecticut.
Yeah, pretty quickly. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's where we all learned to drive, and I definitely think. I mean, again, we all use a hybrid, but I rely more heavily on dramatic landmarks than counting streets, or you know what I mean. And have any of you guys played the game Red Dead Redemption?
No,
I'm aware of it. I know that you've played it.
Yeah, so it's a very large world map that you're playing in, and you ride around on horses, and of course it's like 1890s or something. So it's all rural, and I find it very easy to navigate around that map because it fits what I'm used to doing. They also have these treasure maps where you have just like a couple of landmarks, and then you have to try to find it in the world based upon that. And I'm pretty good at finding them because, again, that's typically what I do anyway, is just try to look for a recognizable pattern,
Yeah, but do you remember the first time you drove, like, say, in Manhattan or a real city? That for some people that's intimidating as hell, and it is much more intense than driving where we live. I remember my ex-wife refused to drive in Manhattan, just absolutely refused. Whenever we went, I'd be driving, and it's a different way to drive for sure. You've got to.
It's not the grid system.
It's
the grid system in Manhattan is actually really intuitive.
Yeah,
it's all the other drivers. It's obviously.
And everything else that's happening.
It's
bicyclists.
You got to pay attention. There's no,
it's sensory overload. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Far worse. So in terms of, like, I'm not sure how many different cities you've driven in. Actually, Manhattan.
Boston's
is nothing.
the worst.
Boston is the absolute worst.
I mean,
Boston is horrible.
Look at a map. Look at a road map of Boston someday. You'll see it makes no sense whatsoever.
But I think close behind Boston, I would put, of what cities that I'm personally familiar with, I'm not saying in the country or the world, was Washington, D.C., because it's a lot of one-way streets.
Yes.
And it's a lot of circles, and a lot of the streets, the main streets, are diagonal.
Yes, they
right?
are.
So it's not just a grid. It's a grid, but then there's these major diagonal streets cutting across them that intersect in these complicated ways.
Yeah, I don't like those.
And then you're going down a street, a one-way street, and you run into a building, right? So
that's right.
You can't just stay on the street, and you don't. Where do you suppose your directions were just to go down this street, and now you got to find out some way of navigating around this building. I lived there pre-GPS, so that probably makes a difference. Although when I've been there since, GPS doesn't work fantastic in DC.
Really?
It's how sometimes it also GPS can fail in New York too. GPS has a hard time dealing with multiple layers. Like if there's an elevated road,
right?
It just can't. It doesn't know how to deal with that. Suddenly it switches you to the other road, like it doesn't know where you are. And I think a lot of tall buildings will interfere with GPS.
Steve, about the mapping and the place cells in the brain and everything. So are we talking about the driver or a passenger in a vehicle? Is it kind of two different things? In other words, if I'm taking mass transportation in a city, am I less likely to become familiar with landmarks, routes, and other things because it's somebody else who's really doing the work, who's doing the driving?
So I don't know if there's any I don't know what the scientific evidence says. I know from my personal experience that if I drive somewhere, I learn it way faster than if I'm not driving.
Yeah.
If
So you have
you're
to be
making the
active instead of
actual, if you're
passive.
engaged
Yeah.
in making the decisions, then absolutely. In fact, there are places that I've never driven to, but I've been to, and I have no idea. I would not be able to drive myself there because I've
There you
never
go.
had to do it. And I also think it's different if for people who haven't learned to drive yet. So I don't know if either of you guys had the same experience with your daughters, but like when my daughters were 14, 15, so they're getting close to the age where they can drive, but they hadn't learned to drive yet.
Yeah.
Even to places that we've taken them multiple times before, they had no idea how to get
Oh,
there. Like
yeah, okay.
none. And I would we've been there 100 times, and I would play a game with them. I would test it out. I would say, all right, Julia, you direct me. You tell me where to go to get to this place you've been to 100 times in the car as a passenger. No idea. Like they really have no idea. They could not
Wow.
navigate themselves to it because they've never had to pay that level of attention,
Right. Makes
That's
sense.
funny.
Yep.
Yeah.
So use your brain. Exercise your brain.
Yeah. Yeah, but we had this conversation about technology, like because of GPS. It's like you don't remember phone numbers anymore because it's all in your address book. You click one button on your phone or whatever.
Heck, not even. Call Jennifer.
Yeah.
Just tell my phone what to
I mean,
tell.
I don't know that I know anybody's phone number anymore.
Uh-oh.
I know my own, that just so I can give it to other people. But that's
Yeah, there's really just a few that I could think of.
She was.
If even
I
that.
kind
Wow.
of sort of know a
different.
few phone numbers, but I wouldn't necessarily be confident that I would get it right on the first try.
Remember how good Dad was with numbers? He had a Rolodex in his damn head.
Yeah, but that was all
That was a different
pre-technology.
age. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and the same thing with GPS. I wonder. I mean, I don't know. I do notice that when I rely on GPS to get from A to B, I don't memorize the streets as well as if I had to navigate by myself. Right? Have you guys noticed that?
You're losing a valuable skill
Yeah.
set there, Steve. Yeah.
I remember like when Jay moved into his house, his current house, the first dozen times I went there, I used GPS.
Yeah, that's not easy to.
Yeah, and then I realized it's not easy. There's a lot of back roads, a lot of twisty turny. And then I realized I really couldn't get here without GPS. So then I tried to get there. I had to like deliberately try to drive there without GPS just so I would learn the route by heart and not be dependent on GPS. But I had to make an effort to do that. If just relying on GPS, I wasn't really memorizing the route.
Remember maps?
Yeah, I know.
Rand McNally and all.
We used to break out those
Oh,
maps in the
gosh.
car. Yeah.
Yeah, when I was working in the television production industry, it was about getting to location wherever the heck it was, and this was pretty much pre-GPS. It was maps. There was the whole drawer of maps that we would have to pull, and make our own routes. Go find out and figure it out for yourself. And and I did, and it did make an impression because those are places that even today, without the aid of GPS, assuming the places are still there, I could get there. I'm confident I could find my way there right now with no.
Yeah, we used to keep those, stack of those foldable maps in our glove compartment. But not only that, Evan, when we were, because we lived through the era pre-GPS when you needed to map your way from A to B, is that you would map out your own route, right? So you would learn like all of the highways and all of the roads,
the interstates, yeah.
and you would learn them. Now, when you GPS it, you know the one path that it takes you on.
Yeah, that's right.
Right?
With
So you
barely
don't-
any
you're
recognition
not-
of what number route you're on, what exit
Yes.
number you're about to take. Those things don't matter.
You don't learn the road geography like you do when
Yeah.
you have to read a map to get everywhere.
I remember when I got my job moved, so I moved to a new town, and for months I didn't know how to get to work because my GPS would take me on a different route all the time because it's basically whatever was relatively traffic free that day. So it would take me on 4 or 5 different routes depending on the traffic. So for the longest time, I wasn't sure exactly how to get there. And one time One time, GPS crapped out, and I was like, for a few minutes, I was literally lost on my way to work. I was like, holy crap, I've been here so many times, and I'm not sure exactly where to go because it just kept taking me different ways all the time. That was weird.
Mm-hmm.
And but maps, I think, will become very important again in the apocalypse.
In the
valuable resource.
Yeah.
Yes. Any books
After the apocalypse, not during the apocalypse, but after.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
People. Yeah.
How long would it take before the roads are so overgrown it'll be hard to recognize them?
Full foot one.
Not long.
No, not long at all.
Unrecognizable?
Or hard. Once trees start growing through them and stuff. 20 years? Yeah, I bet you it'd be very hard
Of
to follow.
usable back roads. Yeah, back roads would go first, right? So those anywhere probably 10 to 20 years.
Yeah, first they would break up the concrete, the blacktop,
Mm-hmm.
and then they would slowly sink under the ground, right? Because just as the soil gets agitated,
and trees
worms
fall
move
over
through
with
it.
age, among other things. Yeah, so
That's such a
And meanwhile, Roman roads have lasted for centuries.
Yeah, but if
Right?
you remember when we were in Rome,
Nobody's maintained. Yeah.
and so you're looking at all the ruins in the city of Rome were like 20 feet, 30 feet below the current street level.
Yeah, I remember that. I'm not sure how that works though.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about some ancient Roman roads are still like pretty damn decent. Even after how many years? How many centuries? I mean, they were good. Bottom line, they were pretty damn good road builders.
Right. All right, Ian, I'm assuming we have no quiz this week.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes, we have no quiz.
Yes, we have no Cavendish bananas.
The positive, negative.
We could take some questions, unless you guys have some of the other topics you want to chat about.
Well, you know what I did, Steve?
Yeah. What?
I tried something a little different this week, so I'm just going to throw it out there. I looked up a bunch of terms and then hit the news search for these particular terms. And what it does is it comes up, it brings you to whatever the latest thing the search engine found. So, for example, I typed in words like, let's see, Bigfoot, and then psychics, and then I did, what's this one here? This one is dowsing. Just the usual kind of, baseline stuff that, we've talked about for so long. And it comes up with some pretty interesting stuff. So maybe I'll just read a couple of these for you. And if you feel like you want to go deep into anything, we can. Otherwise, we can just move on. So when I typed in Bigfoot, for example, for today's news, Bigfoot Discovery Museum offers all the evidence you need to believe. So apparently a gentleman way out in Santa Cruz County, that's in California, has opened a Bigfoot museum. Now he's calling it the Discovery Museum, which I find interesting because it reminds me of Discovery Institute.
Yeah, the disco.
Right?
Yeah, disco shoot.
So it's kind of like the word you have to be careful now when you see the word discovery because any crank will take it and then turn it in.
Yeah, it's like don't believe anything that has the word truth in it because that's probably not
right.
true.
It's basically the same thing, the same idea. All right, we don't have to go deep into that. But how about this? The Better Business Bureau, this is in Wisconsin. Better Business Bureau of Wisconsin warns of scam psychics on social media. It's actually something
Isn't
we've
that
talked
redundant?
about before. Right, yeah. And we've talked about that before. But saying there are a lot of reports, an increased number of reports from people who have paid for psychic services, such as astrology or tarot card readings, but never received what they paid for. In other words, they're not cracking down saying that astrology doesn't work, tarot doesn't work. What they're saying is people paid to get these readings and didn't get the readings apparently. So that's the and we've talked about this before several times, I'm sure, on the show, that when you see news reports of governments, local governments, or whatever or agencies getting involved with trying to bring down people who are psychics, scammers in this field. It's about the fact that they took money without offering a service rather than going after the fact that what they're offering is absolute crap in the first place.
Right. Yeah, that's one of those, like, psychics is a scam within a scam because, there are no psychics. So the whole thing is by definition a scam. And then you could argue that, well, maybe some people are doing it for entertainment value. Like if you're getting your palm read at a Renaissance fair, yeah, that's just part of the, the entertainment. But but I think any psychic who doesn't have the entertainment disclaimer and is actually in any way pretending that what they're doing is real is a scam. But a lot of psychics are like part of this psychic mafia. Like they're literally part of like this network of psychics who are scamming people at a deeper level. Like the psychic reading is just a way of luring marks in and then trying to get tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars out of them, by doing some real con on them,
Exactly.
So yeah, it's just the funnel that leads to like the real hardcore cons. And there used to be like a lot of like police departments have the bunco squad, or whatever. They would have
The bunco squad.
Yeah,
that's right.
the officers whose job it was to break up those kind of scam artists.
Yep.
And but a lot of them don't have it anymore because it's like, oh, I guess we're believing psychics are real now. So just the threshold for busting them for being a scam is just a lot higher than it used to be, which is really unfortunate.
Very unfortunate. Yeah, I know. And there's a lot, and certainly a lot more of it. There's more of it today than ever. And I think I come to a story in that in just a second. But here's what came up under dowsing today. Here's a recent news story. This one's out of some place called Yes Weekly, the Jamestown News. Is that Virginia, Jamestown?
Yeah.
Dowsing, okay. It really works. It's a helpful tool for genealogists searching for a known family cemetery. So now you've got dowsers or genealogists apparently who are using dowsers or learning about dowsing themselves so that they can go to the cemeteries and use their technique, their idiomotor effect to locate graves of people and say, okay, you're related to this person. And that's it's creative in a way, but there's nothing you can't douse for apparently.
Right.
And when genealogists are using it, it's giving it unfortunately some more legitimacy. Here's a news item from a little while ago that we didn't cover, but we missed it. Now in baseball, there's a baseball player for the St. Louis Cardinals named Adam Wainwright. For those who are familiar with baseball, probably know this name. So he said half of his Cardinal teammates believe the Earth is flat, and he said this on television. Yep, he said about half.
Wow.
He basically just outed half his locker room. I don't know how we didn't cover that or even touch on it, but that's.
And has there been any follow up to that? Because that sounds like an extraordinary claim.
It does. Let's see. So this is back from October, unfortunately. So it was a little while ago. I didn't see anything following up on that. It's far from the first time. Yeah, far from the first time that athletes have breached into believing the planet is flat. Right. Kyrie Irving, a basketball player, and we may or may not have spoken about that on the show or maybe one of our special events at some point. We spoke about that because when he brought it up about his belief in flat Earth, like Twitterverse blew up essentially and caused it all to trend at the time. So let's see what he says. Some Wainwright certainly does not buy into those beliefs. It was not clear whether or not he was able to making headway on convincing his teammates that the Earth was not flat. So apparently he went through a process of trying to explain to them why it's not flat. But yeah, and and again, it could be an exaggeration, it could be false, but it definitely did make headlines back on CBS.
Now I'm reading though that it might have been just a joke that him.
Oh, he
saying that
joked.
was a joke. Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. You get on national television.
Like maybe he was just being euphemistic, like there are a bunch of flat earthers, But
right, just using it in the colloquial
I don't think
sense.
like that has been confirmed. So it's hearsay at best, and may have been a joke. Not that there aren't a lot of people who believe it, and there were some sports. I forget who it was. Some specific sports celebrities who came out as believing the Earth is flat. Right. I've had people, just like random people, who are like, oh, I saw that YouTube video and it's got to make you think, there's something going on there. It's like, no, there isn't. The earth is not freaking flat. Yeah. It just, there's a level of not only lack of critical thinking skills, but you have to be profoundly scientifically illiterate to entertain the notion for even half a second,
Yeah, that's right. I know.
It's funny how you mentioned to somebody, oh, did you know that person X over here that you know is a flat earther? And they're like, no, she's not really a flat earther. Like, meaning like, it's like, no, she can't possibly be a flat earther. Like, yes, they actually don't believe that this person that they know is a flat earther. It's like, oh, they're just like, they're just saying that. And like, no, actually
so
a flat
earther denial. Is that what that is?
Yeah, it's like they just can't imagine that this, because you hear about it, but to actually know somebody well that's a flat earther, it's just like people, I find it common. People just don't even believe that they believe it.
but which is a reasonable response. That's perfect. Like your first reaction being, nobody can be that stupid, is actually a very reasonable response. It's unfortunately wrong. That's the same response I get when I tell people who don't know what homeopathy is.
Right.
They're like, no, it can't be that because that's stupid. It's like, no, it actually literally is that. That's what it's magic potions. That's
Steve,
what it is.
I'm glad you brought up homeopathy, Steve. Here's the news for today.
All right.
Right out of Dubai. Headline reads, mental health, Ayurveda, that's the Indian medicine, and homeopathy, now part of basic insurance plan, says the government, says the Dubai Health Authority. They are now covering it. It's doubly sad that they're including sort of mental health in this whole new package of insurance plan allowances, which is, that's great news, frankly. But at the same time, you're allowing in homeopathy and the traditional Indian medicine. No, that's terrible. It's like they're equating the two in a certain way. When I read this article, that's just horrible. That they both deserve the insurance reimbursements for that they're treated at that equal kind of level. The legitimacy that they're giving to this is
now the quacks are winning.
They're definitely winning. Yep. So there's a little sample of crazy stuff going on in the news. Little skeptic topics for you. Every day is a new adventure with this stuff.
All right, Ian, do we have any questions for us?
Yeah, we have a bunch of them.
Good.
So let's see. This one is the closest one. So what's the deal with chiropractors? I thought that chiropractors weren't genuine, but I work with nurses, and one of them seems to think it's a form of physiotherapy. Someone I know says that they are real chiropractors, but there's a lot of unlicensed chiropractors, and it's the unlicensed ones to avoid. I heard chiropractors get lumped in with the likes of homeopaths. What's going on?
A little bit of a spectrum.
That's a complicated question. I'll try to address some of the issues you brought up. So first of all, it depends on what country you're in. In the United States, the problem is not with unlicensed chiropractors. Chiropractors are licensed, and they are very good at preventing people from practicing chiropractic without a license. That's the whole point of licensure, is to avoid competition, right? Same thing with naturopathy. If you're not a licensed naturopath, then you're not a real naturopath. There's a way of stifling competition, not increasing standards. The most people who prescribe homeopathy are chiropractors. So there are more chiropractors prescribing homeopathy than homeopaths in the United States. Again, other countries will have a different mix. Like there are fewer chiropractors and more homeopaths in Germany, than there are in the United States. The ratios flip. But in the U.S., it's actually mostly done by chiropractors. Naturopaths probably prescribe more homeopathy per practitioner, but there are fewer of them than there are chiropractors. So some chiropractors do basically end up doing, if they try to do what's reasonably evidence-based, you end up just being a physical therapist. But physical therapists are very quick to point out, but they're not trained physical therapists, right? So they're just doing like their approximation of physical therapy, maybe with some manipulation thrown in there. But that's the minority. That's like 1-2% of chiropractors. Most are going to do mostly pseudoscience. either do things that go way beyond the evidence or that are pure magic, like applied kinesiology, iridology, homeopathy, things like that, just prescribing herbs, willy-nilly out of their office, all sorts of things. They're just not science-based. They don't have any kind of science-based standard of care. So it's kind of the, Wild West. So it's hard to make any one statement about all chiropractors because it is so varied. The only thing that you could say overall is that the vast majority of them are, steeped in pseudoscience of one type or another.
Next question is, the CDC says boosters aren't a concern yet. Pfizer says they are. Should we be concerned?
Yeah, so Pfizer said that the protection from their vaccine drops off after 6 months. But the CDC and the WHO are saying it's too early to say. Not that that's not legit, but like we need more data. We don't have enough information to recommend with specific vaccines when a booster will be necessary. There's also conflicting data because other studies show that it should last for a year or two. So I think we just have to continue to wait. We might be getting to that point where they're going to say, okay, we definitely need to start scheduling boosters. I guess just partly because it's, a round number, I think we might come in at the 1 year mark. Both because, again, there's no absolute cutoff. Like if immunity wanes, at what point do you say, okay, now we need to do a booster shot, right? You got to just pick some point.
Judgment call, yeah.
So just for pragmatic reasons, like having an annual shot is just a lot easier for people to remember and to schedule and ever.
Right.
Rather than we're going to do it every 9 months, so it's going to shift at what time of the year you get it every. It's not very pragmatic. But the other thing, remember, with the boosters is that it not only will, obviously, boost your immunity back up to the maximum, it also can cover new variants. So it can sort of keep up with this crawl of variants rather than falling progressively behind them. So we'll see. I mean, I suspect, that at the year mark or so, they're going to start saying you should get boosters for those two reasons, and at least until the pandemic is really over. And then, we have to see if it's endemic. Like, is it going to be like the flu where it's never goes away completely? It just sort of goes down to a baseline that's going to continue to simmer along at that baseline. And then it'll probably just become an annual shot, along with the flu vaccine. And I think that's it's probably the likely outcome of all this.
What about the variants, Steve? How does that figure into?
Well, as I was saying, the variants are like, genetic drift, right? It's like they're crawling away farther and farther away from the variants that the vaccines are based on. And so either the vaccines will get less and less effective over time, or you need boosters to keep up with the variants.
Right.
So far, the Delta variant is covered by the vaccine, but maybe it's not quite so much, but if there's a variant of the Delta, like once the Delta variant becomes the dominant variant, then there's going to be new variants of that one.
Well, they're already talking about what, epsilon and lambda?
Yeah, they decided to do Greek letters. So whatever, maybe the Zeta variant or whatever. One of them is going to be so different that the vaccine doesn't cover it at all or significantly.
But we don't know. Who knows what that, virus is going to look like?
That's the future. Yeah, we can't. But just go speaking probabilistically, it's not going to stay the same because that's not what happens. It is going to. New variants are going to continue to emerge. And like the Delta variant is deadlier and more contagious than the previous ones.
Where are we on antiviral technology?
Just like drugs to treat viruses.
Yeah. It's
very hard. It's a lot harder than bacteria. There are antivirals out there that cover like some subset of viruses. And like, you can get the Tamiflu, like for the flu virus, that's an antiviral medication. so far, the ones that we have for these kinds of infections, for the flu or for respiratory infections, are mostly symptomatic. Like they're not going to replace the vaccine or cure you, but they might reduce the severity of your symptoms. We have antivirals for like herpes viruses that could actually save your life, that can cure you, like acyclovir, so it depends on the type of virus. A lot of viruses, we have nothing at all.
Is part of fighting COVID, or COVID-19 and all the variants and stuff, an antiviral approach as well?
Well, they're looking for. Remember, that was the whole thing with hydroxychloroquine. That was an antiviral with ivermectin, which which is a little bit more complicated, but there's again a lot of hype with it. I may talk about this next week on the show, not the one coming out tomorrow, but I might talk about it next week because I think we're due for an update because it seems to be a continued controversy, and there is new data coming out, and it's complicated. So that is an antiviral for COVID. Again, how well it works is a complicated question. So that would be great. Like if we could find an actual drug that was an effective anti-coronavirus, antiviral.
There you go. Now you're talking.
Then that could, even if it didn't prevent infection or prevent spread of the infection, would prevent the most severe manifestations, like keep people from going to the hospital or dying.
Oh yeah,
that would be great.
Weapon, great
that
weapon
would be
against
awesome.
it.
Yeah.
We got a couple questions from chat. One was about smell training. This person started losing their sense of smell a few years ago, and their ENT recommended it. They were skeptical.
I've never heard of it.
Smell training?
Apparently it's to...
Like physical therapy for your...
Yeah, to recover loss of smell.
Yeah, never heard of it. I've only treated a few patients with anosmia. They do present to neurologists. The most of the patients I've seen with anosmia had head trauma. Because like if you're in a car accident, let's say, the most likely head trauma you're going to get is front to back, right? Because you're moving forward, your head's going to hit the windshield or the steering wheel, whatever. You get a whiplash. It's all front to back injury, and so that's the most likely scenario where you're going to get a bifrontal lobe damage, where you could damage the olfactory bulbs or whatever. You're going to. That's where the olfactory sense is. So it's not uncommon if you smack the front of your head to get anosmia as a result, because it has to be on both sides, right? And so I've treated a few patients with that. We do have a taste and smell center, or at least we did at Yale. And so while we did, I just referred everybody there, and then the person who was running it left, and then I think we got somebody else. So that's like at an academic center. That's like not uncommon for like these super specialty clinics to come and go over time, depending on whether or not we have somebody. So again, I don't have that much experience treating it, but I have had to diagnose and for a time manage patients with it. Never came across smell training, but again, that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And maybe it's something new, or it could be something that is really more on the ENT end and not the neurology end. It does sound rather dubious to me. It's the kind of thing I would definitely want to look into deeply before I recommended it or had a strong opinion about it. But it may depend on what the cause is, and it also, I would also suspect if that is, if there is any effectiveness to it, it would have to be for somebody with partial anosmia. You know what I mean? Like you have diminished taste and smell, and then you could sort of train yourself to make the most of what you have, or to maximize what you have. But if you have complete anosmia, I don't think there's anything you could do to train that or to make it to do anything about that. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That's just a lifestyle change.
Yikes. That sucks.
So that's a preliminary answer, but that's what I got for that question.
Okay, so a couple people were asking about this, but one person, not the Steve in our Discord, asks, I'm reading a lot about articles about why and how to wean ourselves off of air conditioning. Thoughts?
How are you going to wean yourself off of air conditioning?
Yeah, that's
is that like as a way of saving energy?
I guess so, or train yourself to be
to
fine
be
with
more
the heat,
tolerant of
more tolerant of
warmer temperatures.
So
My
this
mom-
is
my
what
mom's
I've
okay
read
with that.
about that that if you're trying to be efficient and you're trying to like minimize your electricity use, then you should keep your house on the warmer side in the summer and on the cooler side in the winter, right? So like 68 in the winter and 72 in the summer rather than the other way around, or rather than having it always be like say 70 degrees Fahrenheit, that is. And which makes sense. They said you could wear warm clothing in the winter so that you could allow your house to be a little cooler. And of course, you can dress, very lightly in the summer so that you could tolerate a little bit more heat. But there's only so much you could do. Beyond that point, then it's just how much uncomfortableness are you willing to tolerate. You do get acclimated to the heat in terms of like not passing out, but I don't think there's much you can do to feel comfortable if it's too hot for you. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So then it's just a matter of how much is the comfort worth.
Right.
Yeah, and there's no like right or wrong answer there.
Steve,
Okay.
did you know that they're testing the flu? They're trying. I think they created an mRNA vaccine for the flu,
Oh, cool.
seasonal flu, and they're testing it. I wonder.
Is it
what
a
kind-
universal flu vaccine or just like
Are they hoping?
I don't think the one that I read was testing specifically the universal one.
But
just
even
to-
still, the advantage there would be
Yes.
that it'd be quicker. So the turnaround would be quicker, so it would be a better match
Right.
to the
Right.
strains.
Right.
That'd
You
be
have to
great.
make it not as much guesswork.
Yes.
right, and potentially more effective, since we're seeing numbers, pretty solid, effectiveness
90,
numbers.
95%.
Yeah, that we
Yeah, but
we don't see that in flu- in
The
flu
strain
vaccines.
match is so much more important when it comes to the flu vaccine.
Yeah.
When we have a bad flu vaccine year where it's like 30, 40% effective,
Ugh.
that's because they picked the wrong strain.
Right,
There's
but what's
nothing
a
to do with
good
the
match?
efficacy of the vaccine.
Yeah, but what's efficacy when it's a good match?
It's like 80%, 90%. But again, it's
up to 90. It has hit 90.
I think if you have an exact variant match, yeah.
Okay, so then mRNA won't necessarily be.
Well, it could get up to
Better.
95, but the thing is, if you can consistently get an 80% or better variant match,
It'll be
that would be a
better.
huge improvement
Yeah.
over having years where you have a 30, 40% match. Right now, I get the quadrivalent flu vaccine,
Yeah, the quad.
the quad,
Quadrivalent.
which is recommended for healthcare workers. Probably, if you can get it, I would get the quad.
And when do you get yours, Steve? Do you take it in November?
Now, usually October,
October. Okay.
as soon as it becomes available.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
so yeah, it's like if I get it early October, like the latest would be November. But they start setting up flu clinics at my hospital starting like in early October. And I do recommend getting it as early as you can in the season, because that's the other thing that affects efficacy.
Mhm.
And it takes 2 weeks to take effect. So
That's right.
if you can get it in October, that's when you should get it. If you get it in January, it's still good, it's still better, but you missed 3 months of coverage, where you might have gotten the flu.
It's going to be interesting coming off of the COVID year. This being, seeing what the what the flu vaccine numbers are going to.
Yeah, because there was almost no flu this year because of
I know. So people are going to get too comfortable with that.
yeah.
You're like, oh, I don't need my flu vaccine. No flu last year. Brap.
What do you got, Ian?
Is there any sort of objective evidence on which political term limits are better for the populace? I feel like a short-term limit leads to political whiplash, but longer or no-term limits lead to dictatorship-esque governments. I know I've started a false dichotomy.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I have no idea. I'm not familiar with
boy.
the evidence on that. That is the kind of thing, though, that you're obviously like a political scientist or somebody. Maybe Andrea Jones-Roy would know.
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing she would know about. I
She'd
could
be
ask
the
her
one to
about
ask.
that. So she
Well-
spoke about voting patterns at Nexus 2 years ago. Great talk. One of my favorite Nexus talks of all time. It was really fascinating.
Where could we ask her this year?
Yeah, well, she's actually one of the people running Nexus 2021.
Awesome.
So yeah, I've been meeting with her almost every week as we're doing Nexus. So if she will be there. And in any case, that kind of research is really critical. Like, not only like what the effect of term limits are, but also like what the effect of different voting things like ranked choice voting and what's the effect of redistricting, gerrymandering, like all that stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Like
It all gets tied.
there's studies about all that stuff. I'm just not an expert in that particular question, so I don't know what the science. I would have to look it up before I could talk about it.
Sure. This was relative to your anecdote about driving a different route. Is going a different route good for your brain?
So that's that always like good for your brain is kind of like operationally a hard thing to answer. But what I will say is that what the evidence shows is that it is good for your brain to keep it stimulated, and by stimulated, it seems that the important thing is to give it novel stimuli, right? So like if you do crossword puzzles, doing a crossword puzzle every day is going to quickly lose its neurological benefit. But if you switch to different types of games or different types of activity entirely, that tends to be far more stimulating and beneficial to your brain. Although, you know what the single best thing for your brain is in terms of your brain
Reading.
health?
Sleep.
Exercise.
Physical exercise.
Physical exercise.
Sure.
Just being physically in good condition
Gets
is
the chemicals all...
the best thing for just your biological brain function. And then in terms of like what's good for your brain in terms of its like information and memory and stuff like that, it's just anything that you do, you'll get better at what you do.
Right.
So just doing stuff is better than not doing stuff, and doing a lot of different stuff is better than doing the same stuff.
And if you want to get good at a specific task, then do that specific task.
Do that specific task.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But there's a practical reason to know multiple ways to get to the place you're going. I mean, like take today, for example. How many roads were shut down because of flooding, because of the rain we had this morning? I know I have a 10-minute drive to my office normally from the house, but the road flooded, so they shut it down. So fortunately, I knew without having to resort to my GPS, I knew another way to get around that. So practical.
Evan, did you see that movie? It's like one of the first fully CG movies, Ants.
Yes. Was that the Jerry Seinfeld?
I don't remember.
No.
But I
just
remember the scene where like there's like this line of ants, and they're each carrying a little piece of a leaf back to their nest.
Leaf cutter ants.
Yeah, and then something fell like right in front of one ant, so that he was separated from the line in front of him, and he goes, "I'm lost." The only thing he knew to do was to follow the guy in front of him, and without that, he had his algorithm was over. So yeah, that gets back to that whole GPS discussion, where the more different ways you know things, the more you're fleshing out your internal map and the way you'll learn how things interconnect with other things. Mm-hmm. That's the other thing. Like when you know different areas to different degrees, and there is that place where you know how to get from A to B, but you don't really know how everything hooks up together, But then when you're like really familiar with someplace like the place you grew up in, you know how all the streets interconnect. You could take a dozen different routes to get places.
Oh, we were kids on our bikes. Forget it. Biking around. That was a great way to learn where everything was. Great way.
All right, let's do one more question.
A wrap-up question.
Oh boy.
Make it the best question.
Okay.
Ever.
We know lumosity is bunk, but if I'm joining an improv group, will that help me be witty on my feet?
It could.
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah, I think so, because that is there's
Practicing.
there's skill is overlap there. I'll tell you that the experience that made me personally a lot better at thinking on my feet, on speaking extemporaneously, on speaking to a crowd was, what do you think, Evan?
Live action role playing.
LARPing. Yes. I swear to God, LARPing was like thrown into the fire partly because of the path that my particular character took. I ended up having to like corral 100 people into doing something.
That's true.
And I had
And
to
if you
do
want
it.
results, you have to get up there and do it.
So
You have to-
I got better at it. I learned how to. But at first, I didn't know how to command a crowd, and you, of course, you get nervous, you get stage fright, and but do that for 3 years, and then it became nothing. And those skills were absolutely transferred to the same basic skill, but in other contexts.
to other LARPs.
It's part. I think it's part of my skill set in terms of I can get on stage and talk about anything, and and not be nervous and hold the crowd's attention. That's a LARPing experience.
I agree.
That point.
That was
absolutely.
That was my same sentiments when we first took a stage as the Skeptic's Guide to the Universe. One of the TAM events, or and what would have otherwise, if I don't think if I had my LARP experience, that would have been a much more intimidating environment for me.
Yeah, and again, part of that, and because psychologists use role playing to train clients to build life skills, because when you're role playing, you're not really like you, and the relationship is not really real. You're role playing, right? So it kind of removes a lot of the social barriers.
Yeah, or
then you can
perceived risk.
You can flex your
Social
muscles
risk.
and you can practice doing those things in a low risk environment because it's not you. You're just this character you're role playing. And so I think that's why we were able to learn all these skills while role playing. It's kind of like what psychologists have learned is very effective. So I absolutely think that improv is one of those things where you're doing improv. You could absolutely learn a lot of theatrical skills, interpersonal skills, stagecraft, whatever, all those things, because you're improving, so absolutely, I think there's probably a lot of transferable skills you would learn from improv.
And there's improv that occurs during our Skeptical Extravaganza.
Yeah, we do some improv. Improv is actually not too far off from role playing. It's different. It's not technically the same thing. There's there's acting, there's role playing, and there's improv. They're all distinct things. I think improv and role playing are pretty close. Acting is very different than role playing or improv. And because acting is because you're not when you're acting, you have to read the lines that are given you,
right,
and do it's all scripted, as they say. So it's a very different skill set. I've only done a tiny bit of acting, and my role playing was a lot less useful than I thought it was going to be for acting. But for improv, it's like the overlap was extensive.
There you go.
Yeah. There we go. A lot of my personal anecdotal experience, but I think that's.
I'm seeing some text from T Jader, TJADER. Hey, send us an email, info@theskepticsguide.org if you had problems with the book, getting the signed book. I'm not sure how we missed those, but send one today, and we'll definitely see what's going on. Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you guys for joining us at the Friday live stream.
Yes.
Jay should be back next week.
No J rants today, but
no J rants today.
No J rants. No Wolfie.
No Wolfie. Yeah, I guess when you do the Wolfie cards, Ian, this is just more work for you. I guess you could make ones all right, there's no J this week, so you have to do the J-free Wolfie cards, or just for.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, I could make those.
It's no big deal.
We'll
put it on your list.
More things from you guys too. I think it's just heavy J.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah, because Jay helped you make them or something.
Yeah, basically.
All right.
I got most of them from Discord.
Thanks as always, Ian. Again, it's just the. I know Ian doesn't like to get attention for doing his job because he's a consummate professional, but the work that he does behind the scenes here to make all the streaming magic happen is incredibly awesome. I don't, you guys may not appreciate it. To you, it's just oh yeah, it's a streaming thing, but there's a lot of tech magic that goes on behind the scenes. We couldn't do this without Ian.
Maintenance.
So thanks, Ian.
Thank you, Ian.
Absolutely. It's all very important stuff, as you can see.
Yeah. All right, guys. We'll see you next time.
Enjoy your weekend. Skeptic's Guide to the Universe is produced by SGU Productions.
dedicated to promoting science and critical thinking. For more information, visit us at theskepticsguide.org. Send your questions to info@theskepticsguide.org. And if you would like to support the show and all the work that we do, go to patreon.com/skepticsguide and consider becoming a patron and becoming part of the SGU community. Our listeners and supporters are what make SGU possible.